Hi guys, this is kind of an impromptu video we're doing today. Um, a question that I've been getting a lot recently is asking me how much I spend on the game. So it's always too much, by the way, stop asking. But also how I've chosen to gear my character. I think gearing has changed a lot in the past year because of Guardian Angel in MapleSEA at least. So this video is specifically for MapleSEA and how I would choose to gear up in like 2021 in MapleSEA. This video is not targeted for F2Ps. It's not F2P video, I'm sorry. MapleSEA is really difficult to be F2P, so I wouldn't really recommend playing MapleSEA or trying to go for hard bosses in MapleSEA if you're trying to be F2P. It'll take you a very long time. But it's targeted towards the people that are at normal bossing right now, like let's say normal Lotus, normal Damien, normal Lucid, normal Will, and you want to make the jump from normal bosses to hard bosses, and what's the most efficient way of doing it without spending like $1 billion on your gear. So, a bit of background. I participated in both GAs. So the GAs, the Guardian Angel event, if y'all don't know what it was a very OP event that made getting 22 star very easy in MapleSEA. And it's the main reason why gearing up in MapleSEA is very different now compared to before. Because before, it was just very difficult to do everything. Because MapleSEA has very bad cubing rates. Our tier up rate is very bad. It's the same as KMS, it's not like GMS. GMS basically has like 4 times our tier up rate. But in KMS, the tier rate is just as bad. Except that in KMS, their cubes are much cheaper. For example, in KMS, I think a pack of Epoch cubes costs 21k won or 21k A cash, which is like 21 USD, something like that. Whereas in MapleSEA, it's 40k A cash, which is 40 SGD. It's quite a big difference. It's much more expensive to cube in MapleSEA compared to in KMS. So, before GA happened, it was very difficult to gear. But nowadays, ever since GA came around, it's actually pretty realistic for a lot of people to progress from normal bossing to hard bossing, mostly because of how prevalent 22 stars have become in the market. So yeah, we'll be focusing on a few main areas where you want to work on, that you want to work on as you progress along and you're aiming towards hard bossing. I'm not saying that you have to spend a lot of money all at once. You can work on it slowly. Like you can rely on events, things like DMT, Hexa cubes, or maybe you wait for a good deal to pop up and you just buy it straight up from other people, right? So it's always good to keep your options open, to have a general plan. Like I think the most important thing, especially when people ask me how I managed to gear up so quickly and how I spend my money, is to have a good plan. Like you have to know what is efficient and what is good for your character, and not just blindly throw a bunch of money at a lot of different things and then hope that shit sticks on the wall and you manage to somehow become strong enough for hard bossing. You actually have to have a plan. Like just as with anything else that's in life, you need to have a clear and concise plan and a goal to work towards, so that you know exactly where you're at and what you need to do to progress to the next step. So for me, I'm gonna try and make this video something that or trying to give you tips on what you can do to make the next step towards whatever stage of bossing that you're at. So let's start from the bottom, or not really from the bottom. Let's start with the people that are going from normal bossing to hard bossing. So this is like a big proportion of population. I think like probably like 70 to 80% of Maplers are stuck at normal bossing. They haven't made the jump to hard bossing. And if you're looking to make the jump to hard bossing, well, I have some tips, so let's get into it. So the most important thing to realize that when you're playing MapleSEA nowadays is that 22 stars gives you a lot of attack because of the starring, obviously, and it also gives you a lot of hidden stat that you can't really see on your stat page. So for those of y'all that usually watch like GMS videos or like GMS guides on how to gear up, and you follow their metrics, like, you need this amount of stat to do this boss, you need this amount of stat to do that boss, forget all of that, because that doesn't apply in MapleSEA. GMS uses stat as a benchmark, because in Reboot, it's very easy to get Legend Port. Even in Reg server, it's very easy to get Legend Port. So they will always cube first to Legend before they go for 22 star. They will go for a 2-line on Legend Port first before they start going for 22 star. It's the opposite in MapleSEA. You go for 22 star first because of GA, because 22 star gear is so cheap, and then you go for Legend Port afterwards. So what this means is that you get a lot of attack, a lot of flat attack, because your 22 star gear has a lot of flat attack when you start it up to 22. But you have a lot less stat because you don't have the potential to back it up. So you don't have to care about GMS metrics. You just have to know exactly how strong you are in your gear. And the easiest way to find that out is Dojo. That's why Dojo is a staple in MapleSEA. That's why Dojo is a staple in KMS as well. Because stat is kind of a misleading... both stat and damage range, like your attack range here, are very misleading when it comes to how to judge how strong your character is. So, okay, let's actually get into how I think gearing up should be. So, let's say that you are normal bossing. We'll assume that you have some 22 star gear. Maybe you have everything 22 star. I don't know. But let's assume that you're not that funded. You're working with Absols, maybe 22 star Absols, but you just can't seem to get to the dojo floor required or the damage required to go for certain hard bosses. My advice is, when you're at that point, when you're at the point where you have full 22 star gear, everything is epic, is to work on your WSE. What this means is to work on your weapon, secondary, and emblem, these 3 slots. So what a lot of people think is that stat is very important, like, you should tier everything up uniformly, try and get everything to unique, then try and get everything to legend, and then try and up your stat first, and then afterwards you will see gains. That's true to a certain extent, but to be honest, the most efficient way to gear up is to focus almost everything that you have, all your resources, onto your WSE once you've hit the point where you have 22 star epic on everything. So what this means is that you can be rocking 22 star Absols, full set of 22 star Absols, maybe an ACS weapon 22 star as well, and everything is epic 9% main stat. After that, my advice is to work on your WSE. So what this means is to try and get your weapon, secondary, and emblem to legend main port. Airport, we'll talk about it later, but getting to legend main port on your weapon, secondary, and emblem is pretty damn important in my eyes, because let me give you a direct example. So for me, if I were to enter my stats into a calculator, about 30% strength gives me 4% final damage, around there, maybe. Yeah, around 4% final damage. If I manage to get 9% more attack, that is also 4% final damage. So basically, what I'm saying is that if you have everything at 9% epic main pot, like 9% main stat already, if you want to tier it up to unique and you get 15% strength on 15% main stat on unique, you're getting 6% only, 6% stat only. Let's say you do 4 or 5 items, 5 items maybe, you get 30% strength. That's a 30% strength increase overall. That's not even equivalent to getting 1 line on your WSE. Yeah, basically. Like, it's not equivalent to getting even 1 line of 9% attack on a legend WSE. So you can see how strong your WSE is, because it affects your range, or it affects your damage output the most out of any piece of equipment in your inventory. So the most important thing is to go for legend on your WSE for sure. My advice is try for... Oh wait, give me a sec. Okay, yeah, I'm back. Sorry. Short break. Yeah, my advice is go legend on your WSE. That will give you the most gains. So, okay, let's go with a baseline of what I think is needed for hard bossing. So if you want to hit hard bossing level, there are a few things that you need to do. So let's talk about the first 4 hard bosses, the first 4 Arcane River hard bosses. Well, not really Arcane River, because Lotus and Damien don't count, but whatever. Lotus, Hard Damien, Hard Lucid, Hard Will. These are the 4 that I've grouped according to their HP, although H Lotus is a little bit harder. But anyways, it's those 4 first, right? In order to go for these first 4 hard bosses, most people would say you need around 93% IED, and you need to hit about floor 49 to 50 dojo. Around there. You can go a bit lower for Damien, because Damien's easier, but you need to hit around 93% IED, and floor 49 to 50 dojo. So that gives you like some very clear goals to work towards, because the first thing you should notice is that you need IED. Like for normal bossing, you can get away with low IED. You can get away with like 85, 86% IED for like all the way up to normal wheel. That is perfectly fine if you have the damage to back it up. But when you go for hard bossing, IED is very, very, very important. You definitely need to work on your IED if you want to be a contributing member of a hard boss party. So what are the ways to work on IED? Well, in MapleSEA, we have very, very limited sources of IED because we don't have things like Godlocks, we don't have things like Familiars. So you see in GMS videos, they'll recommend that you go for 3-line attack and stuff like that. Ignore all of that, because in MapleSEA it's very different. The whole landscape of gearing is very different. So in order to get your IED lines, there's only three main ways that are consistent, that will consistently give you IED. One of them is leveling up and getting hyperstat. So adding 10 points or so into your hyperstat for IED is very important, because that gives you 30% IED. The second way is to work on your union. Your union, if you manage to get 6k union, you unlock the full grid, you can get up to 40% IED from your union. So that's the second big source of IED that you can get. And the third is obviously your WSE. So this ties back again to working on your WSE first, because you need to at least get a baseline of like 92, 93% IED in order to go for hard bossing. IED is something that has diminishing returns, but when you get your first batch, like when you hit a certain benchmark of IED, is the most efficient way to get damage. So once you get to about 92, 93% IED, that's like the sweet spot. That's around where it's most efficient. That's the most efficient way to get damage, and you should probably stop around there if you're only going for the first 4 hard bosses in Arcane River, because that's probably good enough. And you don't want to really go higher, because IED, as you get more and more IED, each additional source of IED contributes less and less to your overall IED. So you don't need to go for higher, because it's not very efficient to go for to spend more money on IED. So that's the first thing. Is getting the required amount of IED. And in order to, and here's that brings me to another point, is where to get the source of IED on your WSE. So a lot of people will say you should throw the IED onto your emblem, because emblem you can't get boss lines. The only thing you can get is IED and attack, which are very, like, the two most important lines on your emblem are IED and attack, because you cannot get boss lines. So most people will say, okay, get IED on your emblem and then get boss attack on your weapon and secondary, and that's all well and good. Like that is like, if you're talking about in a perfect world where you have perfect 3 lines, your weapon and secondary are both boss attack at Legend Port, and then your emblem is like IED attack. That's perfected WSE. That's like the cream of the crop. You don't want to change it already, because, you know, that's absolutely perfect. But for most people that are making the jump from normal bossing to hard bossing, you don't want to be spending that much money. You really don't, because you don't need to perfect your WSE in order to go for hard bossing. What you need is just usable lines. So for example, what I mean by this is, if you get everything legend on your WSE main port, or through DMT or whatever other means, you can roll for line. You can basically make do with 2 liners. So what this means is, you can go for IED and attack on your emblem, and then the rest you can go for like boss and attack. You don't have to go for perfect 3 liners. When I started hard bossing, I didn't have perfect 3 liners on anything. The only reason why I have 3 liners right now is because I hexacube them. So, you know, you have to wait for hexacube. I would recommend waiting for hexacubes in order to perfect your WSE. But before that point, you just roll with what you got, or what you can, or what you get, if you don't want to spend too much money. And that's like an efficient way of spending your money, because hexacubes are the best way to get your 3 liners. Unless you're ultra well and you go for equality cubes, but we'll talk about that later. So, my suggestion is to work with what you got. So let's say you get all 3 pieces of your WSE to legend, and let's say you roll IED attack on your weapon. Okay, wait, no, let's restart that. What I mean to say is that when you look at your WSE, you should look at it as a whole. So you don't look at the individual potentials of every single piece of equipment until you're ready to optimize your WSE. What you do is you look at your WSE as a whole and you see what you need. So let's say you're around 90% IED right now. You need 1 line of IED. You can get that 1 line of IED on any piece of your WSE. It's fine. because you're not aiming for perfection just yet. So for example, let's say, let me give you like a very rough example. Let's say you roll a 3-liner on your weapon. You roll like ID attack. Most people say that's not good because there's too many ID lines on your weapon. But if you're not looking to be an ultra whale, I will keep that first. Because having a 3-liner is really, really good. when you reroll a 3-liner, it means that you're looking for another 3-liner, which is really difficult. Either that or you're going to get a 2-liner, and that's going to be worse than a 3-liner anyway. So let's say you reroll it, you get boss attack. That's going to be worse than ID attack, for sure. So as a rough example, let's say you get a 3-liner on your weapon, you get ID attack. That's fine. What you can do is you can choose to optimize the rest of your WSE based on what you already have. So for example, if you get ID attack on your weapon, okay, fine. Then you aim for boss on your secondary. And then for your emblem, you aim for attack. You don't need 3-liners to do hard bossing, to do the first 4 hard bosses. You absolutely do not. Don't listen to anybody that tells you need to perfect your WSE in order to hard boss. They're lying. So yeah, my advice is to work with what you've got, and then, you know, just get your pieces to like an acceptable level with 2-liners, or if you get lucky, you use 3-liners. You get 3-liners as well. The only reason why you reroll some lines on your legend WSE at first is if you get too much ID. For example, if you get 4 lines for ID, you get ID on your weapon and secondary. At that point, that's too much ID. Reroll. Try to reroll things to optimize it. But yeah, that's my advice, is to work with what you got. Don't spend too much. I don't have like a ultra optimized WSE, and I'm doing every single hard boss right now. You definitely don't need to fully optimize your WSE. I would say that I'm getting carried for Black Mage. I'm definitely getting carried for Black Mage, but everything else I'm pulling my own weight and then some, for like all the way up to Sea Jungle. So you don't need a fully optimized WSE in order to contribute in a hard boss party. In fact, if you're going for the first 4, you probably only need 2-liners on everything. So try and work with what you got. Try and hit the certain benchmarks that you need, like 92, 93% ID, and then the rest, you try and get boss or attack. Either one, it works. So you might ask me, but if I go for Legend or my WSE, do I just keep everything else at Epic? And the answer is actually yes. Like, no joke. When I first started running hard bosses, I had full 22-star Absols. I wasn't an ACS gear yet. I was in full 22-star Absols. I had an Arcane Weapon 22-star as well. And literally everything except for my glove was at Epic 9%. Epic 9% strength. And I was about 450, 51 dojo. And that's good enough. I didn't have my pots were different as well, by the way. They weren't as good as they are right now. But yeah, that's good enough. You don't need like the optimal, like you don't need to tier up every single thing to unique in order to do hard bossing. With 22 stars, they can carry you pretty hard. You just need like 9% epic strength or 9% epic main stats on most of your equips in order to go for hard bossing. So yeah, that's my recommendation. So that's why you put a lot of focus onto your WSE first. And then after that, once they reach a certain level, that's when you start working on everything else. So, oh, okay, speaking of that, we can move on to Airport, I guess. So Airport is in a weird spot because Airport cubing is very expensive and you won't get that much gains out of it unless you drop quite a lot of money, because Airport there's no black cubing, the tier up rate is horrible, and the lines are very difficult to roll because there are a lot of trash lines in your Airport. It's not like a WSE where there's less trash lines. There's a lot of trash lines in Airport, so it's very difficult to roll Airport. My honest suggestion is, if you are already at the first, you don't need any amazing Airports to get to the first 4 hard bosses. You can just run with LR and 3% attack on your Airport for your WSE. That's good enough for hard bossing. If you want to make the next step, you want to like try for 3-4 man hard bossing, or you want to maybe start working towards going for Tenebrous hard bosses, in that case, I would go for Epic Airport on everything first. So the way I usually do it, or the way I like to do it, is I like to do it by a roulette. So what I mean by this is that first you tier everything up to Epic, then you try and get 6% attack on everything. So let's say everything is at LR right now. I go for Epic on this, Once it tears up and it gets 6% attack, I work on the next piece of gear to epic 6% attack. Then afterwards, I go to the next piece of gear, epic 6% attack. So you're not throwing all your resources into one piece of WSE and trying to get LL, because that's very expensive and there's a very low chance that you get it even during DMT, because airport cubing is cancerous as fuck. So my suggestion is, if you want to see steady, consistent gains, is to work on each piece individually, and then once you manage to upgrade that piece, you work on the next piece after that, and then the next piece after that. And you try and get them all around to the same level for your WSE at least. Of course, the easiest way to do it is to just buy lah. If you want to just buy like your weapon and secondary, but your emblem, you can't run away from it. Emblem can't be traded. You have to you have to work on the emblem yourself. So yeah. So yeah, there's two ways to go about it basically. You get, let's say you're at a baseline of everything 22 star episodes already. You want to make the next step, you can either buy your WSE and go for LR or LE or LU, up to you. But your emblem, definitely have to work on it by yourself, and it's also one of the few pieces that you should definitely focus on before you work on anything else. So yeah, that's what I think is important for hard bossing. At least for if you're trying to make the first few steps into hard bossing. The next thing after that you might ask is, what do you work on after your WSE? Let's say you get everything to LR already. Everything is like at least 2-liner or maybe even 3-liner on some of your WSE. The next thing that will give you the most gains is working on your glove. So gloves are special because they have one line that's very important, and that's critical damage. Crit damage is a very, very strong line. 8% crit damage for me. Okay, so for comparison, 1% crit damage to me at my current crit damage rate is worth about 4% main stat. So it's 1% crit damage is worth about 4% strength to me. So getting one line of crit damage is basically equivalent to 32% strength. Now you imagine rolling for, okay, if you haven't experienced it before, rolling for 30% or 27% or more on legend pot for your armors is horrible. Like, even thinking about getting a 3-liner on your WSE or on any of your armors or anything like that is horrible. You're gonna spend a lot of money. It's ridiculously expensive to try and go for 3-liners if you're not using Hexa cubes. Hexa cubes, different story. Hexa cubes are amazing. They're the best cube. When they come out, you should try and buy them if you're a whale. Or even if you're like a light spender. Hexa cubes are one of the best things to spend your money on. The most bang for your buck, basically. But if you're using like regular red cubes or black cubes, shooting for a 3-liner is absurdly expensive. So that's why curing up your gloves is so important. Because getting one line of crit damage is extremely, well, I won't say extremely easy, but it is very, very likely. And one line of crit damage is already equivalent to upgrading, like spending like hundreds of cubes on another piece of gear. And you won't have to spend hundreds of cubes on your glove. Trust me, you probably need like maybe 50 cubes if you're very unlucky, very, very, very unlucky to get 1%, to get one line of crit damage. So yeah, gloves are the next step after WSE, in my opinion. And that's exactly how we'll optimize moving on from normal bossing to hard bossing. WSE and then gloves. I know it's very long-winded, I'm sorry. But anyways, so yeah. What else do I have to say? I mean, to be honest, you don't need super high gear in order to go for the first 4 hard bosses. Like Damien, Lotus, Lucid Will are not that difficult because the requirements are quite low. Like I would say around floor 50 dojo is more than enough already for almost all of those hard bosses. So yeah, shouldn't be very difficult to hit that point. If you know, gear up like a normal person, like you get your 22 stars, then afterwards you work on your WSE. Shouldn't be that difficult to get to that point. Now, the next big thing to talk about when you're gearing up and when you're trying to strengthen your character is seed rings. Seed rings are insanely good. Like, they are insane. The value of a seed ring is super high. Like one seed ring, if it was down to me, if I had a choice between a seed ring or a 22 star ring, I would always use a seed ring. Because the seed ring is very strong, especially when you pair it together with your burst. So I cannot recommend seat rings enough, especially for people that are gearing up for hard bosses. Because when you're going for hard bosses and when you're gearing up for hard bosses, seed rings will give you that extra boost that you need, the extra bit of damage that you need to clear certain dojo floors in order to do more damage, or it also lets you do a lot more damage in your burst stream bosses, and it provides you like this kind of steroid that you need in order to be a very good contributing member of a hard boss party. The price of a seed ring is much less, or not much less, but it's significantly less than a piece of legend gear, and the seed ring gives you way more damage than any single piece of legend gear will give you, except for your WSE. So let's say like your armors, your accessories, even if you get a legend pot 30% strength or 30% main stat piece of accessory or piece of armor, it will not be equivalent to a seed ring. A seed ring will give you way more damage, especially during bossing. So my advice is get a seed ring, at least one. If you're making the jump towards hard bossing, if you're willing to spend a bit of money, or if you're willing to save up a bit of meso and buy it off the auction house, seed rings, very important, very useful. This applies even to end gamers now, because right now at a 10 bill damage cap, a lot of end gamers are hitting 10 bill lines even without seed ring. But once they remove the damage cap in Neo, seed rings are gonna become much more relevant because you can hit above 10 bill, you can hit up to 150 bill. So seed rings are future proof. Don't worry about it. They are 100% future proof. There's no way you won't use them. And it also occupies a ring slot. So okay, for a lot of people, ring slots are a sore spot because rings are expensive. Or rather, there are not very many good rings out there that will give you that will significantly improve your account. So if you didn't get a 22-star Carnal Treasure in the first GA, or maybe even the second GA, if you boomed your Carnal Treasure, that sucks, and that's one slot that's gone already. My 22-star Meister Signet is fairly cheap nowadays, so I will assume that most people that are pushing for hard bosses have a 22-star Meister Signet at 9% main stat maybe. If you're lucky, maybe you have it at Unique or Legend. Then your third slot, Heka Signet, is discontinued. So there's no more Hacker Signets in the market, or there are, but then they're very expensive, and getting them to 20 star is pretty tough without GA. So there's a limited supply. These things are a limited edition item. They're gonna run out sooner or later. So that leaves you with like very few alternatives, because the other alternatives are Giant Fear. That's a hard boss accessory. It's ridiculously expensive, and starring it to 22 star is gonna be insane. If you're using a 17-star Giant Fear, there's something wrong with you. You might as well just use the event ring. The other option is a Scarlet Ring. Again, very expensive because it is basically equivalent to a H-Boss accessory because it occupies the same slot and it gives you the set bonus. So people value Scarlet Rings very highly. And the third option is BOD. And if you have a BOD, you probably aren't watching this video because you don't need to. There's no reason for you to watch this video if you have a BOD already. So those are the three other options that are, I would say, end game worthy, or they retain their potential to reach. You can go to end game with those rings basically. You don't really want to be using event rings. Event rings are like, they're good at the start, but they're not great. You can upgrade on them quite easily using like Meister Signet and all that. So that's why ring slots are very difficult to fill in MapleSEA. We don't have Corlux. So seed ring, definitely something you should look into. That means that your fourth slot will always be occupied by a seed ring. You don't have to care about the fourth slot. You just focus on 3 slots instead, and you don't have to worry so much. And it's great because it reduces the burden on you to try and tier things up and to try and perfect things. So yeah, seed rings. My recommendation for a budget player. RR3, Weapon Jump 4. Both of those things are worth less than one piece of L-Port gear, 22-star L-Port gear, most of the time. They're worth less than that. In Aquila at least, they're quite cheap compared to a L-Port piece of gear at 22 stars. So yeah, seed rings. 100% should get them. If you can get 2, if you don't really want to spend that much money, get 1. It also depends on class. So this is like a class difference thing. If you are like a let's say your hero where you only have one big burst. This is I'm just drawing hero here because I'm a hero main, but you only have one huge burst, which is your combo instinct burst. It's okay to only have one seed ring. That's perfectly fine. You don't need to, because when you swap your seed ring for the next burst, your next burst is pretty pitiful. Like, you don't have combo instinct, your burst is pretty pitiful. So it's not that much value in getting a second seed ring. I did it because, you know, pushing dojo floor, dojo flex, whatever. And it's also useful in certain bosses like H Damon. For other classes, like another similar class is Night Lord, where you have only one big burst, which is spread throw. When you don't have spread throw, you're garbage. You're pretty garbage. So yeah, you probably only need one seed ring. So there's that. For other classes like Pathfinder, like again, let me draw another example. Is Pathfinder, where your bursts and where your two bursts are pretty much the same, because both of them require tornado, or both of them, in both bursts you use tornado, except that for your bigger bursts you have Maple Goddess Warrior Blessing, you have Critical Reinforce, etc, etc. That's like your big burst. And then your smaller bursts, you don't have Maple Goddess Warrior Blessing, you don't have crit Reinforce, but you still have tornado. So like when your bursts are like quite aligned, the value of having two seed rings is higher, because you can, you know, during the binds you will do roughly equivalent amount of damage. So seed ring is basically empowering both bursts. So yeah, that's important. Yeah, seed ring. important. I would highly suggest anyone that doesn't have a seed ring, go and get a seed ring. Definitely one of the things that will push you to the next level. Just as important as your WSE. In fact, I would say seed ring is more important because it's more cost effective than working on your WSE. It costs very little. The only issue with seed rings is that it's untradeable, so there's no resale value, but you know, sometimes you just gotta bite the bullet and get something, and get the thing that will give you the most cost effective damage, right? Let's see, what else can I say? Well, that's about it actually. For those people that are at normal bossing and working up to hard bossing, that's pretty much the only advice that I can give. Okay, we'll move on from the first 4 hard bosses, like the Arcane River hard bosses, up to H-Will, to the next 4, the Tenebris bosses. Tenebris bosses, you need to make quite holistic upgrades to your gear in order to go for Tenebris bosses, because most of the time Tenebris bosses are pretty bullshit. So every single Tenebris boss is pretty fucking bullshit, actually. Sea Dusk is a bullshit. Aquila is fucking bullshit. And Sea Junker is extremely bullshit. In fact, Sea Junker is probably more bullshit than Black Mage, and Black Mage is the last one. So most of the time, people employ the strat of just kill it lol, or just kill it 4-hit before it kills you. And my party does that as well. We just overpower the boss and just burst it down as quickly as possible, because the mechanics in those bosses are just retarded. They're not fun. So most of the time when you're going for Tenebris bosses, you have to be, most people would request around floor 55. Maybe struggle parties will go 54, but most people will say they want floor 55 attackers to go for Tenebris bosses. Not counting Black Mage. Black Mage you need probably floor 59 to 60. But yeah, for Tenebris bosses, you need to improve your range, or improve your dojo floor quite a lot, quite significantly. So there are ways to do that, but they all involve spending a lot of money. So warning, you're gonna have to spend a lot of money. At that point, it's pretty expensive. So once again, there's efficient ways to do things and not efficient ways to do things. The most efficient way, I would say, if you're looking to go to Tenebris bosses, one, make sure that you have AK Union. 100% make sure you have AK Union. The amount of free stat that you can gain from AK Union is very important. So if you're not like an ultra where you don't plan on buying a BOD, you want to get there at a steady pace. One of the things that you should definitely work towards is AK Union. It's free stat. It's free real estate. You should just take it. There's no good reason for you to not have AK Union if you're going for Tenebris bosses. Especially with the amount of OP events that MapleSEA has running for Union grinding usually, like things like 大姐 event, Haze, G3, all these events that help you go for AK Union. So over the course of like time, slowly work towards it. I'm not saying that you have to get AK Union within 1 month or 2 months. I myself took about a year to get AK Union, so yeah, work towards it. Definitely try and get it. So first, AK Union. Second, try and get unique port or a unique ad port on your WSE. I know it sounds expensive, it is very expensive, but my suggestion is unique ad port, because once again, attack percent gives you so much more than main stat does for all your equipment. I'm not saying that you should still be at epic main port for all your equipment, because that's unrealistic. You probably will be too weak if you're at epic airport or epic main port for all your equipment, or your armors at least, and your accessories. So you should try for unique on your armors, and you should also try for unique airport on your WSE. Now the way to do this usually I would say is you should only work on airport during DMT. Try your best to work on airport during DMT. Like go for unique airport during DMT, only during DMT. If you want to be efficient about spending your money. If you're talking about main port, if you're looking for unique main port on your armors, on your accessories, if you want to throw money at it, you can just throw yellow cubes. That's an efficient way of tearing everything up to unique. So tearing at this point, everything is very expensive already. The gains that you can get are very expensive. So like the cost to get your gains that you want are very expensive at this point. So the best way to do it is to find a way that spends the least amount of money and gets you tangible gain. And that generally, like before when I said that you shouldn't get unique on your main port, is because the amount of gain that you get versus the amount of gain that you get from tearing up your WSE is very disproportionate. Like tearing up to unique main port on your armors and your accessories is not even half or not even a quarter as good as tearing one item to L on your WSE. But now, since your WSE is already L and your ad port is maybe unique, probably not lah, but getting ad port to unique and getting the attack lines on it is very fucking expensive. So comparatively, tearing everything up to unique using yellow cubes, like main port on tearing your unique main port on your armors and your accessories to 15% main stat maybe, is much more cost effective. So that's one thing that I'll focus on. Try and get, unique. So for example, my ACS stuff is all unique. It's not all of it's 15, some of it's 12, but I try to aim for unique 15%. My Meister is 15, my Carnage Treasure is 15, my Sakaton is 12, this is 15, this is 15. My armor, my Fafnirs are still 9%, but I'm working on that. My Dom is as well 9%. I'm also working on that. So yeah, these things, try and get all of these things to like unique 15%. It's cost effective. It's probably more cost effective than going for 9% attack airport. Or sorry, unique airport on your WSC. Legend airport is like a dream for most people. It's very expensive unless you're super whale or you get very lucky during DMT. So yeah, you can't expect to make huge gains in like a couple of weeks. It's a long process. Maple, like gearing up for endgame bosses is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So make use of events, things like event cubes, make use of DMT. If there's hexa cubes, definitely get to hexa cubing if you are aiming for endgame bosses. And yeah, the rest of the time, if you want to throw money at yellow cubes to tier your stuff up to unique. Yeah, that or just straight up buy gear. That's another thing that you can do. But if you're a bit cheapo like me, you don't really want to spend too much money, you can tear up the noob way, which is using yellow cubes, go for 15% main stat on your accessories and your armors. Yeah, that's my suggestion. It differs from class to class as well. So for example, my class is very OP. Hero is damn strong. So at 40k stat, you can solo H2 sit. Easy. Okay, not easy, but you can solo H2 sit. But for other classes, you probably need much higher stat. So it's also a class difference thing. So when you're approaching H bossing, when you're approaching endgame, you better bloody well make sure that you like your class and you're willing to put in the effort needed to get to where you want to be. Because after a while, you start to realize that certain classes just spend way less money and they get way stronger than you. Cough Arc, cough Hoyang, cough Hero, cough Adele. All these classes spend significantly less and they can be just as strong, if not stronger than you at varying gear levels. So when you're aiming towards endgame, you either pick a class that you really like and you don't mind being weaker than other people even though you spend more money, or being the same strength as other people as even though you spend more money, or you pick a class that is obviously OP. Although these things change based on balance patches lah, but generally they don't change that much. Like you don't drop from like first place to like last place in like in the course of one balance patch. So yeah, be careful with your main as well. Once you're looking at endgame or once you're looking at late game. It's the best advice I can give, basically. So yeah. What else can you do for endgame? I guess just levels then. Okay, so levels is a big factor in endgame bossing. So you might think that you just need gear. That's not true. You need levels. Because for endgame bosses, a lot of them are very high level. So for example, Aquila is level 250. That's the lowest level already. And that's the same level as H-Build. But Sea Dusk is 255. Sea Junker is 265. And Black Mage is 275. So if y'all don't know what the final damage formula is for levels, basically when you reach the same level as the mob, you get 10% extra final damage. When you get 5 levels higher than the mob, you get another 10% final damage. So that's 20% final damage right there just from levels. So if you're fighting Sea Dusk at level 250, or even at level 245, you're going to be doing like minus 30 to 30% final damage, yeah, around that. Well, if you include the final damage that you gain from being high level, you lose about 40% final damage. So there's a lot to be said about getting high levels in order to increase your damage as well on these bosses. So dojo is one thing, levels is another. You also need the required levels in order to contribute in a party. And most endgame parties know this, and they will ask you to level, or they will request for people at a certain level in order to clear hard bosses, because, you know, dojo floor doesn't cover everything. A floor 59 at level 245 is doing way less damage than a floor 57 or 56 at level 260 to Sea Dusk, just because of final damage difference. And Arcane Force is a given. I'm not going to talk about Arcane Force because I assume that if you're going endgame, you're max Arcane Force already. But levels is a big thing. So, for example, for me, at Black Mage right now, I am doing minus 30% final damage at level 265 to a level 275 mob. If I want to, every single level that I gain gives me 3% final damage. So if I go from 265 to 266, I get 3% final damage just from leveling. I'm not saying that leveling is not a time commitment. I'm not saying that leveling doesn't translate to money as well, but it's definitely something to consider when you are trying to gear up for endgame bosses. Is maybe instead of working on your gear, you should work on your levels instead, and then you will also in that way gain more damage on the bosses. So yeah, I think I'm done actually. That's about all I wanted to cover. If you guys have more questions, you guys can leave it in the comments, I guess. But for now, I think that's all I want to say for gearing up. So that's basically how I gear my character up, and that's how I think is the most efficient way. It's just my opinion. If you guys have different opinions, you can leave them in the comments, I guess. But yeah, other than that, I don't really have anything else. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope that you guys are able to hit whatever dojo floor or whatever boss you want to do, and I hope you're able to clear it. Hope it helped, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.